second session is called Implementing High-Impact Open Data Initiatives, Best Practices and Success Factors. There are several speakers, and I would like to give the word to Oleg, Petrov, Senior Program Officer, ICT Lead, World Bank. Please, Oleg.
Good morning. I hope, dear guests, you will forgive me for my Russian. I will speak in Russian. As an exception, I'm deeply grateful to the governor and Deputy Chairman of Ulyanovsk Government for the wonderful partnership that has been established between Ulyanovsk Oblast and World Bank in the area of open data. For us, it's a very significant event indeed, and we will tell you about the first results of our collaboration at this seminar. We do hope that this collaboration will continue and it will yield results not only for Ulyanovsk Oblast but also for other Russian regions, as the results of Ulyanovsk Oblast might be applied in the future to other regions. I hope we're in the beginning of a long and interesting journey. I represent the ICT department of the World Bank, and within our department I am the coordinator of programs in Russia and in a few other countries. So let me share with you the experience we have accumulated in open data and open government programs. This session is abundant in experts. The experts will bring you various examples from different countries of the world, so I'll try to make an introductory presentation. Mikhail Bunchuk, the representative of the Moscow office of the World Bank, who is in charge of ICT as well as the coordination of regional programs of World Bank in Russia, will contribute to my presentation in terms of telling us what we have already achieved and what has been done. Let me share the main issues about open data with you, and then my colleagues from World Bank from the UK will tell you about the critical factors that determine the success of open data projects. To illustrate the key success factors and global experience, I would like to show you this diagram that shows you the complex vision of building the ecosystem of open data. You can see here that there is a number of factors for success. I will not go in details on every factor. To do this, we'll have a presentation of Jeff Kaplan after lunch, where Jeff will tell you about the research that was made in Ulyanovsk Oblast within the framework of this particular approach, while myself I will speak about three main issues. The first and the foremost thing for the success of open data, open government, is the political leadership and the human factor. Well, from our experience, I can say that when you have a figure 1 and then 0, 0, 0, if you don't have this number 1, then the zeros mean nothing. This illustrates very well the human factor. If you don't have a human leader, you'll have no success, because this 1 will turn your zeros into a big number. As long as you have no 1 in your number, the zeros will not work. So we can note with pleasure that in Ulyanovsk Oblast we do have this human factor on a high level, and this allows us to boost the other elements of the system rather quickly. Another thing I'd like to highlight is even if the government manages to open the data, even if everything is easily available via different mobile and non-mobile devices, as long as we have no demand and as long as the population is not using it, the work will be in vain. One of the leading experts in internet, Tim Berners-Lee, one of the founders of World Wide Web, said that the data have no value as long as they are not used by somebody. So the demand for open data is one of the key factors for the success, and you have to work with it. You shouldn't anticipate automatic success once you publish the data on a portal. There must be undertaken complex efforts to develop the demand. So there is an English proverb saying that you normally dance a tango. To dance tango you need 2 people. So the same can be said about open data. If there are no 2 parties in the process will not be attractive. We do need the participation of various stakeholders, and our colleagues Katya, Canter and Jennifer will tell you in details about who should you attract to and who should you involve in the ecosystem. This is one of the critical factors for the success, to work with demand and involvement of the society and different groups of data users. And of course, first of all, you have to involve business, because you will yield the economic effect from using the data when business is using the data. Some other factors are, I would say that technologies, infrastructure and the portal are not the least important, but these are the easy-to-do factors. There are many examples of successful portals, but I wouldn't say that the cornerstone of the process is a good portal. Of course, this is a necessary constituent of the entire process, but if you are focusing mainly on the portal, you will not yield a success. It's just like the top of the iceberg. The smallest part is visible and the invisible part is much bigger. By invisible part, I mean a number of other factors. So if 90% of your efforts are focused on developing the portal, you will not yield a success. But still, you shouldn't underestimate a good portal, because a good portal is a good platform for the concentration of efforts and various actions, and since the iceberg you see on the surface of the water, the visible part of the iceberg is the visible part of your work. It's surely significant, but not the most significant thing. I will just highlight the main points, and then my colleagues will go in details. Mikhail Bunchuk, as I told you, who is the coordinator of World Bank Moscow office, will tell you what we were working with in Russia. And good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to welcome you too. I know many of you recently or long time ago we got in touch, and since I'm working in the World Bank in ICT and open government area, I know many of you. World Bank has been working for a long time with initiatives of open government to boost the dialogue between the government and the society, although we haven't been always calling them open government, and some of the things were already launched when the concept of open data and open government was not so popular. in Russia. One of the examples of this kind is the project on the increase of transparency and civil activity on the local level. This is the project we conducted in Perm Krai. We did this project in collaboration with the Ombudsman of Perm, and we had another project which was called Acting Together, which allowed the population to report about some problems in their locality via street journal platform. We can see many platforms of this kind at the moment, but in 2011 in Perm it was really a pioneer project. It was very unique and very popular. The second project was about the development of open GIS maps based on OpenStreetMap platform, and the involvement of the society was one of the components of the project. And also one of the objectives of the project was to develop the community of mappers, people who were developing the GIS, and not necessarily these were the IT experts. These people could be just people living in the villages and communities of Perm Krai. As the topic of open data and open government was getting more and more important in Russia, we actively started to participate in this work, and the ecosystem approach to building open government Oleg was mentioning and Ivan Bechtin was mentioning. We were promoting this project from the very beginning, and this topic was the central one in our seminar in June last year. And the seminar we conducted in June was the main kick-off meeting that allowed us to conduct the project. We actively collaborated since then with the Minister for Open Government, Mr. Abuzov, to develop the National Action Plan in terms of Russia's accessing the open government. And maybe some of you took part in our conference, Open Government Conference in 2012. In December we conducted this conference in Skolkovo, and this conference was prepared in collaboration with Open Government team, Mikhail Abuzov's team, and our contribution was that we brought a few international experts. Jeff and Andrew participated in the December conference. They conducted a few master classes in a number of aspects of open government. I think it was a very successful example of our collaboration with federal authorities. We're now trying to increase this collaboration, and we're trying to coordinate with the federal center whatever we do in the regions. By this I mean the federal authorities that are in charge of using ICT in governmental agencies. At the moment, we are conducting a very important project in Ulyanovsk Oblast in collaboration with Ulyanovsk Oblast Government. This is a keynote project for us because, as Juan has already mentioned, this is the first example of the ODRA implementation. This is the first in the world case when we analyze a project via Open Data Readiness Assessment System. And I would like to mention another important project we are implementing in a number of constituent entities of the Russian Federation. This is not a project about ICT so far, but it has a lot to do with the support of the local initiatives and the dialogue between the government and the population. This is the project on promoting, identifying local issues by the population, especially in the rural areas, and finding a common solution of these issues by the municipal authorities, citizens, and the regional authorities.
And this project is being accomplished in Stavropol region, in Kirov region, in Nizhny Novgorod region was initiated, and a number of other areas showed interest towards that project. Next slide, please. And if we continue the conversation, what is offered by the World Bank in the sphere of the open government program and open data, you can see the major components here, the diagnostics and follow-up of the projects to launch the initiative on open data in most various aspects of this problem, and what is also relevant to the proposal of the open data technological aspects, and what Oleg also mentioned, the demand for open data and the most various workshops and seminars to train the users, professional communities, and stimulate the demand and creation the application on the basis of the open data. And here in our arsenal we have fairly interesting tools how to do it with the principles of the best practices, and we are going to cooperate with those Russian experts and organizations which work in this field to make these joint proposals. The training and development of competences is a traditional important area of work, and we are prepared to continue. If we speak about the main advantages of working with the World Bank, primarily this is access to the best world practices. The World Bank is fairly efficient in generalizing and providing the regions and at the national level the best solutions of the global practice in most various thematical spheres, structured knowledge like training programs or events, and also bringing along the carriers of this knowledge, and lots of people who are present here in the hall, the leading experts, global experts on open data, and of course the independency of the World Bank on some vendors or suppliers of the solutions. So, and our position of principle is to give a comprehensive picture on the partners we are working with and solutions available on the market, and also some commercial approaches, and to give full-scale information how to structure the strategy by working with different vendors. And I would also like to stress that the World Bank possesses comprehensive expertise on a number of sectors, be that education, healthcare, private sector, and reforms of the state sector, and upgrading of different spheres of the state governance. And the advantages here with us when we speak about the open data in this or that topic, we could use the expertise, both the experts on open data or IT specialists, and also the expertise of theme specialists on education, healthcare, or any other sphere. of open data application. And I believe I will close off with this, and I wonder if Oleg Petrov would like to add towards what was spoken here. If not, so thank you very much.
The second speaker is again Andrew Stott, Senior Consultant ICT Unit World Bank. Lessons from openspending.org. O-E-R-G.
Start the clock. So very quickly, data.gov.uk launched officially on the 21st of January 2010 after about 6 months effort. My first day in my new job as Director of Digital Engagement, I had a letter from the Prime Minister's office saying that the Prime Minister had heard about open data and he wanted Great Britain to do something and what could be done in 6 months and could they have a project plan and a budget for it. And there was no particular hurry, so if they could have something by 5 o'clock that afternoon, that would be quite soon enough. You know? So I sat down and wrote the plan for the data.gov.uk, and in the first 3 years, I and my successors have opened over 9,300 data sets from the UK government. That includes 37 gigabytes of geospatial data, maps, addresses, and so on. We've devised a policy framework for open data in the UK called the Public Data Principles. We've got an open government license that applies to every ministry and central government. We've introduced a transparency program, which I'll show on the next slide. And we've actually had 4 versions of the open data site, all of them using CCAN. Each of them evolved in response to feedback from the users of the site, the developers and the other people do that. As part of the UK government's transparency program, every central government ministry and every municipality is required to publish data about itself now, about its operations, and that includes data on its expenditure, item by item, its the pay of its senior staff, the expenses of its senior staff and of its ministers, the use of official credit cards for official business and on travel, contracts issued by the agency, tenders issued by the agency, invitations for contracts, organisation charts, as I showed earlier, and service and performance data down to local offices, individual hospitals, individual schools, and so on. And increasingly now, some information about meetings held by ministers and senior officials. And so what lessons have been learned along the way here? I mean, the first is that top-level political leadership has been essential. And I've been proud that both the previous Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, and the current Prime Minister, David Cameron, have personally backed the open data and transparency programs. And not just by the occasional speech, but by they and their offices asking all the time what more data can be opened, how can we do this, how can we do more, how can we get more applications. So top-level political leadership essential in changing official behavior from secrecy to openness. Every official thinks that they are a special case and need to be led by political leaders, that the government has to change its behavior, has to change its culture. But also demand from businesses and citizens to use data, from responsible journalists, from the insurance market, from the Open Knowledge Foundation and My Society, which are groups of activists looking to use open up data and use it to drive social and civic change and social and civic engagement as well. And it also helps to have a passionate team because the team implementing an open data program can feel pretty lonely. They may have support from the top political leadership, but all the officials they talk to will wonder, well, why does my data need to be opened? Surely my data is special. Surely no one will be interested in my data. It's also important to release interesting and useful data. The more useful it is, the more likely it is going to be used, and the value of data is in its use. And it needs to be data that on things that people care about. As I said earlier, hospitals, schools, crime, environment, and officials and politicians. People care about other things too. They care about wildlife, birds, wild animals and the like. They care about the environment. They care about letterboxes. In the UK, there is a society that studies postal boxes where you post letters. And yet, there was not data on where all these post boxes are. So the post office released data, the data it held, and now there's been a crowdsourcing activity by citizens to geolocate these letterboxes. It's been important to continuously engage with developers. In order to get the data reused, the developers have got to be able to reuse it, and government needs to listen to the developers on how to present the information in the most acceptable, reusable form. Because the harder it is for developers to reuse the data, the less likely it is to get used. You need to encourage young people to use the data. Young people have technological skills, they have time, and they have crazy ideas. They don't know that things cannot be done. So one of the pin-ups of the data.gov.uk movement is Isabel Long, who's a 16-year-old girl who had an idea of how to use this real-time energy usage data to find out whether ministries turned off their lights and their computers at night. And she got featured on the BBC News, and she got to present her idea to the Prime Minister. And, and actually getting girls involved in IT as well as boys in school is very important generally. You've got to release data that people want. So part of an open data initiative has not just been to be the government releasing the data that it thinks ought to be released. It's actually asking the people who use that data what data they would like to be released. And data.gov.uk has always had a facility where people could ask for additional data and specify what they wanted, and other people could comment on that and support that. And we recently re-engineered that to make it more accessible for anyone to use. And as you'll see from this graph, then we've got a sort of explosion of requests for new data coming in. You've got to make the information findable. Actually, we found that quite a lot of information, data was already released by government somewhere, but nobody could find it. Or it was only available to a specialist community, not because it was confidential to that community, but because the people who had released it thought it could only be of interest to those communities. So there was data on wildlife, which was actually in the data set for urban renewal specialists, but people more widely interested in that. You've got to have a clear, common licensing approach where the license is truly open. And in the UK, we decided to have an open government license that applied to all ministries, and now over half the 400 municipalities have adopted it as well. And we've changed the law to make the license also they apply to anything obtained under freedom of information, right to information legislation. And this says basically you're free to copy the data, use the data in any way for commercial or non-commercial purposes. You can distribute it. All you must do is say that you obtain the data from the government, and that you can't claim that the government has in any way endorsed what you're doing with the data, and the government doesn't accept any liability for faults in the data. We decided to have some policy principles, but not to put them in legislation, certainly to start with, because we wanted to test those principles by releasing some data and ensuring that the principles were sound and didn't unduly prevent the release of data or unduly prevent its use. And we've toughened up those principles over time to cover instances that we hadn't thought of where there turned out to be barriers to reuse, and now they're formally part of government policy. Standards in data are very important, particularly where data about the same sort of thing is being published by many different ministries. So on the slide here, you see the European power socket problem. Britain, Denmark, France, Italy, Germany, and Switzerland all have incompatible data formats when all you want to do is get the electricity out of the wall into your computer or into your shaver. So what we did was set and consult with the data users standard formats, standard protocols for common data like spending data, both central government and local government. And as I say in the moment, we learnt a lesson about that as well, which I'll come to. We also found that it was important to deliver step-by-step, incrementally. It's not possible to free all the data at once, to open up all the data at once. So what we decided to do was release what we could easily do, let people start using that, learn about the process of releasing data, and then turn to other data where it was less easy to release. There were more policy issues, there was official resistance, and deal with those. So we started with 1,189 data sets, and it's now up to 9,385 over 3 years. You need to manage expectations, and the Prime Minister himself gave a speech saying that there will be mistakes. There will be errors in this data. We're not going to wait and try and correct all that data before we put it out. We're going to put it out so people can tell us where it's wrong, and people can tell us which are the most important things that we should try and get right. So that any investment that's put in by government in improving its data is where that investment is going to be useful. And some funny things came out. So the British are obsessed by two things. Firstly, we're obsessed by the weather. And second, we're obsessed by the railways. So one of the early data sets was a railways travel survey. So, of course, people on the first day we published it wanted to go and look at that. And when they followed the link, they found that instead of getting a survey on rail travel, they got the British bacon and ham production statistics. And this metadata error had been on another government website for over a year, and no one had spotted it. And it was only by putting it on data.gov.uk that people could find this interesting data, go looking for it, and find the error. So actually putting it out there tells you some of the errors, and then of course, it's very easy to correct. Improve data quality over time. And as I said earlier, you can use the wider community of data users to help improve that quality. Some people said to me, Andrew, just give us a couple of years and we'll improve the quality of our data and then we can publish it. And I said, look, for the last 20 years, you've had erroneous data. How come in 2 years you will be able to correct it? In 2 years, you'll be telling me the same story. Let's get the data out there and let's help data users, citizens, help us correct that. And let's explain that the data may not be right, but it's the best we have, and we look to people to improve it, and that worked well. As I said, you need to measure conformance, and I want to pay tribute to Open Spending and Lucy Chambers in here, who recently developed a tool which goes through all the data sets published by every central ministry and every municipality of its spending and check that they are actually in the format they should be, that they're publishing the data in the time scale that they are supposed to be publishing the data, and that it is in the right file format. My colleagues wrote to all the departments a week before we went live with this, saying we have developed this automatic tool. Agencies that are, ministries that are up to date with their data will show green. Those that are far behind will show red. It's being done by an independent body, the Open Spending, so we can't stop them doing it. But we have this preview that you can look at and see where you stand. In that week, before we went public with this, there was the highest number of check-ins ever, new data sets put onto data.gov.uk. Officials do not like league tables because they work in getting performance. You need to measure reusability as well as accessibility. Just having the information on your website is not the same as making it available for others to reuse. So ministries that deliberately turn their data into PDFs so they can't be reused, those problems need to be confronted. And finally, so you need to recognize success. Some data sets are more important than others. One of the questions posed to me at the start of this was, Andrew, you're just an intellectual, you'll be interested in this stuff, but your mother won't be interested in it. Believe me, when we published the data on the pay of senior officials, including myself, my mother was very interested in this data. Andrew, why are you so low down this table? And actually, publishing data about the senior officials suddenly made senior officials very aware of the transparency program in a way that they hadn't previously been. You need to publicize good applications. Someone developed an application for a smartphone that used the location sensing to find out where the phone was, accessed the National Crime Database to find out the level of street crime in that neighborhood, and then if you shouldn't have your mobile phone out because it might be snatched, it flashed red, and you can put your phone back in your pocket. And that application was the top application on the Apple App Store for 6 weeks running in the UK, using open data. And create heroes among the developers, and I talked about Isabel Long earlier, and highlight the applications. It's the applications that use data. And the final message is, I talked earlier about transparent government, about improving public services, and about economic growth. None of that is done by having meetings and long discussions about open data. You can debate this until, as we say in England, until the cows come home. It's about action. It's about getting out and releasing the data, learning how to do it, doing it incrementally, learning as you go, building up the capability of both the government and the users of the data, and getting effective action for economic growth and more transparent and open government. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. So the next speaker is Lucy Chambers, about lessons from open spending org. This topic is very close, and it continues to some extent the speech of Andrew Stott. So, Lucy Chambers, expert Open Knowledge Foundation.
Спасибо сначала за приглашение. Прошу прощения, что я буду говорить на английском, потому что когда я говорю на русском языке, это обычно про Пушкина, а не про открытые данные. Так что буду говорить на английском. Yes, thank you very much for having me. You've got a beautiful city. My name is Lucy Chambers, and I work for an organization called the Open Knowledge Foundation, which was started in the UK. And now now an international network of organizations. That one. That's great. Across the globe, we've actually got a relatively small team ourselves. And a lot of the work that we do is done through volunteers and organizations who care about this, because we don't believe that there's a cookie cutter template for open data in every country. Everybody's going to have their own ways, the most important things that are relevant for their country. So we work a lot with local experts in different countries to help them to open up their data. So we are involved on both supply and demand side. We help people, governments, scientists, cultural organizations to open up their data. And we also deal with the demand side, and that's my job, particularly to help with actually getting adoption of the data that gets released in the first place. I'm here today probably wearing two hats. I work on two projects, and I'm going to hopefully go into a couple of practical examples which further illustrate the points which Andrew was making about the lessons learned from working with open spending, and also our new project which is called School of Data, where we are working particularly with civil society organizations and journalists to help them make use of the data that's out there. I think tomorrow I'm going to be talking about data journalism. I was also one of the editors of the Data Journalism Handbook. So if anybody does have any data journalism related questions, I'm very happy to talk to you about that. So a brief history to start off with of the open spending project and how it started. I think it's about the initial idea for open spending was hatched over 8 years ago by one of my colleagues who realized that it was very important for citizens to know on a kind of in a form that was relevant to them where their money was going. So there are various elements of the Where Does My Money Go project. You see the URL down there. And it initially just started by showing data from the UK about where money was spent in different spending areas, and also had a feature which turned out to be quite important and has been one of the parts of the site which has been most frequently featured in the media, which you can see up in the top right, which is called the Daily Bread, which translates the big numbers, the billions and the millions which you see in government budgets and spendings into numbers which are actually accessible for the average citizen. So you have a slider which allows you to input your particular income, and it will show you on a daily basis what that means for you, how much you individually, based on your income, are contributing to various sectors of society. And it's been featured numerous times in the Guardian data blog, and actually some of the comments that we get on them are really quite intelligent, like not your typical kind of internet psychos. It's just really really intelligent comments that come out of it, and why is this like this, and why is this like that? So originally it was conceived as a tool for citizens, And I'm just going to talk about now how it's evolved now that it got a bit more mature. So after the initial success of open spending, as I mentioned earlier, it's open source software, so anybody can take it and adapt it. We realized that there was a need for anybody to be able to do this for their own country, to be able to explain to their citizens what they've got. So now we've got a global community, we've got over 30 different countries' data in open spending. And the community consists of people who don't only use open spending, they also use their own tools that they've built themselves. And the use cases for it are quite interesting. We've seen open spending used to explain the budget of Uruguay to parliamentarians themselves, so not citizens at all, but actually to people within parliament who can understand the big numbers. We've seen parts of it reused all over the place. There's a Czech adaptation of the Daily Bread, a Hungarian comparative visualization of where the different priorities in different countries lie. It's being used for countries which have participatory budgeting to help to explain the kind of status quo. We've been talking to other parts of the World Bank about potentially getting some of the visualizations painted on walls for countries with low bandwidth, where they can't use the internet so successfully, to explain to people before they go into this participatory process what the kind of current practices of government spending are, and how they can change it by participating in participatory budgeting. So we're best known for the visualizations. They're kind of the thing that people come to us for, and the things that they know us for initially. But actually, from my perspective at least, there's a more interesting part to open spending, and it's the fact that putting all of this together in a central database actually gives you a very, very powerful database which you can search across. And people have come to us with all manner of questions that we never really envisaged would be things that people wanted to answer when we set out. Andrew mentioned the expenses scandal, the MP's expenses scandal, which I think is a fantastic example of things that people have wanted to find out, and there are all manner of things that people are starting to look for, and combining open spending has an API, so that they're quite often combining our stable open data with closed data and proprietary data from other sources. But it's really important to have this core in a central place where people can search for it. And people are using it to answer questions like, how much has investment in UK schools gone up? Did my country get less from the latest stimulus than other countries? What other contracts did that company who were caught being corrupt in one place get in other parts of the country? So all manner of questions. And as more and more countries start producing transactional data, we're getting the ability to answer more and more of them. Sorry, that hasn't quite come out properly. But just by way of introduction to why when we talk about open data, we often talk about the technical aspects of open data. And the Open Knowledge Foundation is quite a technical organization. We build tools, lots of which are experimental. We don't know necessarily when we start out whether there's going to be any uptake of them. But by way of contrast as to why we keep hammering on about why it's so important to have our data in Excel rather than PDF, I just want to contrast the situation that we have in the UK, where we're incredibly lucky to have all of this data in machine-readable format with other countries. So there's a network of journalists which work on farm and fish subsidies across Europe. And every year they have an event which they call the Data Harvest, where they're actually, because there isn't open data available for every country out there, they have to scrape the data from websites. They have to do freedom of information requests to get all of this data. And it takes them weeks and weeks and weeks. And that's just not the best use of their time. They could be spending that time doing research, doing very important, answering the questions themselves. But this happens every year. And if it were open data, they'd be able to answer it immediately. So a couple of lessons, there are many, many lessons, but in potted history. For example, when the Coins database, which is the UK spending information, came out, it wasn't immediately usable because they didn't give us the instructions for how it was put together. If you're releasing data, you need to release the supporting documentation as well if you're going to get people to reuse it. What means what? How is it put together? Is this geographical area different from another one? Unique identifiers are incredibly important as well. A lot of the questions that people want to answer using this spending data relate to, for example, a particular company. And you need to know, for example, is Vodafone UK the same as Vodafone UK Limited? And for that, you need things like corporate registers, and you need them to have an individual company number to be able to answer those. And lastly, the person that uses this wants some kind of guarantee that if they put in the investment to really understand this data, to learn what they need to be able to use it, or if they're going to start a business with it, that it's not going to disappear. Like, they need some kind of guarantee that it's going to be released. They need to know roughly how regularly, and otherwise they won't make the investment in the first place to learn. And finally, just a quick note on the other project that I work on, where we're trying to get civil society organizations and journalists to start embracing this data. It's been quite a revelation to us how basic the demands of countries, of organizations are. We have to in a lot of senses from the very, very beginning, teaching them things like Excel, how to put things on a map. As soon as they have that, there are a list of kind of probably 10 key skills that as soon as they have that, they're empowered and they can do an awful lot with them. But you do have to start quite basic. The most popular courses that we have, because I know there's talk of establishing a centre of excellence for this stuff in Ulyanovsk. The most popular courses we have are visualization. Unsurprisingly, you kind of have to use visualization sometimes as a bit of a carrot to make them go through the other things, like cleaning data and things like that. And there's lots of things that we really wish we didn't have to teach, like screen scraping to acquire this data, because as I mentioned, if it was just all open initially, then they could do more interesting things. A quick note on actually engaging people through hackathons. Hackathons are very popular. Lots of people are trying them. One thing that we found is that hackathons aren't always necessarily the most inclusive way of making sure that people can use this data. And sometimes, so what we've been developing is this notion of data expeditions, which gives non-technical people concrete roles, and they run very well alongside things like hackathons. But it gives non-technical people very concrete roles like data scouts, like analysts, things that they can do alongside people who develop apps and things like that. And lastly, the final thing is that workshops that we do can only go so far. There needs to be some kind of constant social interaction between the NGO and journalist community and the tech community as well. There are movements going on in kind of Europe and America, like Hacks and Hackers. We've been starting to do similar ones where you bring together techies and NGOs to just make sure that they meet on a social basis, so that after they leave a workshop, there's a kind of friendship base for them to carry on. and keep working with the data. And that's incredibly important. So that's it. Those are my contact details if anybody requires them. But thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Lucy, very much. The next speaker is Jennifer Shkabatur, the consultant for the World Bank. Please.
We have a joint presentation. Katja and myself. Katja will start, and I will continue.
So I will introduce Ecaterina Canter, also the senior consultant for the World Bank.
Hello once again. Well, firstly, I would like to say that I really wanted to speak Russian, so please excuse me for some possible mistakes. I deeply respect Russian language, and I really wanted to talk to you and deliver this presentation in Russian. Our joint presentation, mine and Jennifer's, has one important objective. The central thought of this presentation is that the use of open data is as important as opening the data, and the efforts undertaken are as important as the very process of opening the data. This is the main thing we want to tell you. You have to keep it in mind from the very beginning to avoid any mistakes and use the lessons learned on the global arena. Our presentation consists of two parts. I think that many governments can find themselves in this situation, like this man who doesn't know what to do in front of the open doors. Okay, we open the data, but what's next? The first question our presentation is answering to is how can you use open data? Well, Jennifer can focus on who can use the data and how to involve people in these processes. There are many ways of using data, but we identified 5 categories where we think it will definitely increase the efficiency of state governance and state's public services. Open data improve the feedback, contribute to the involvement of citizens in the process, improve the civil control, it allows to choose services, and it stimulates innovation and joint development of services. As for the first category, in our session about successes and initiatives, we have to mention that one of the key factors to the success is to have the platforms that give you the opportunity of both having data and feedback. This is the example from UK and Canada. Canada has open data and the possibility of feedback too. Another approach is an open model of collaboration to identify the solutions of the problems. This is based on Open 311 methodology, and the key of this approach is that one person can report about the challenge, other people can add information to this challenge, and in this way this is the so-called citizen-generated data, when this data comes from the citizens and help the governments to improve and change the situation to the best. Other components add detailed information, and it helps to understand the problem and monitor the services. The example is Moscow and the buildings in Moscow. This platform allows you to see not only the information about your house, but also to monitor the services. As for the second category, involvement of citizens, the most important thing here is that very often when we attract involved people to the control, very often they have to have have basic knowledge about the topic, which is not always the case. So here we have a very good potential of using open data to prepare and train people for this process. For example, this is a very good successful approach when we attract people, involve them in crowdsourcing priorities. This is not a consultancy. This is not the case when you only ask the opinion of people, but on the contrary, you involve them in the joint solution of a particular problem. In Indonesia, for example, there was a problem when they tried to involve people in the joint solution of the problem, such as the distribution of local budget. The discussions were very speculative. While when people developed the mini guides for every region, every district, they made the discussion possible, and this discussion was based on specific information this time. The third category is, and the most important one, is data can help you to improve public control. For example, to monitor the state procurement. This identifies the violations and corruption in this area and prevents it. At the same time, it increases availability and openness of state contracts. Lucy already mentioned it, and there is a very popular trend on the global level to help the journalists to do their work by use of open data. This is very interesting. When the journalists are telling us human stories that are backed by statistics. There was a very interesting case in Las Vegas. The Sun newspaper analyzed a number of medical documents, and they found many infections that could have been prevented, and they found many medical mistakes. The interesting thing is the government responded, and 6 acts were adopted as a result of this research, which showed that the medical system, healthcare system, was not functioning properly. Of course, open data help you to choose services. Once you have the information, this becomes possible. For example, in the United States, they have the hospital care platform where you can compare the hospitals and decide where you want to go for treatment. This is very important. In the UK, they have a similar platform, which is not based on the specific data though, but every time people were attending their doctor, they were writing about their opinion in the platform, and over 400 medical institutions have an agreement with this platform, and they want to take more information from the platform and try to enhance their services. And the last thing is that open data boosts innovations and joint development. This is very important because there are opportunities for the new social services to be co-developed by the society. Many governments and cities are doing this, and of course the government becomes fully open for collaboration and the development of applications. This is not the necessary thing though. The main idea is how to use data in an innovative way. This is an example, the finalist of Apps for America competition. People thought there is a lot of information the government has about our region and the city, but you cannot find this information in one and the same place. So this guide built a platform where you can see this information. This is another application, Triage, where you can find a doctor and check your symptoms before going to the doctor. To prevent all this in practice, we have some things that can contribute to increased understanding. Lucy was mentioning visualization. We all know that it helps better to see the links, the trends between different factors. This is one example. This is not a finalist, this is the winner of Apps for America 2. This application is called data mesh. You take two data categories, you combine them, and on the right hand, for example, you can see the use of alcohol and the link of alcohol and accidents. Car accidents. Another successful approach is not just to ask people's opinion. I think this is a matter of yesterday, of the past. But the more important thing now is to involve people and develop joint solutions. This is the so-called spectrum of participation. Any government can find itself in this on this diagram where they are and where they want to be. It's very important to move on the line. The first thing is to provide information, to deliver information. This is what everybody is doing. And then you progress across the lines and you are then accountable to the society. The last thing I want to say that there is one more thing to involve people, involve everybody. Don't leave out anybody. This picture shows you that for some people, data is not accessible. You need to help them and be helpful in this area. And another thing is to prevent. And once we are doing this, we have to prevent something nobody is using, or we can prevent something like this. The situation when people feel themselves lost and they don't feel why they need information. Before giving the floor to Jennifer, I want to say that you need to involve your people, and then it will be the key to the success. This little man there shows you that he involved people and he was a success. Jennifer will focus on who are those whom you need to involve from the target audience for your successful initiatives. Thank you, Katya. I will continue. Как они все русский знают. I will continue now. I would like to discuss in more details the target audiences with you and tell you what the World Bank can offer to you in this area. It's important to understand that there can be different answers to the question whom to attract. It depends on your target audience. Civil society has to be involved differently than the journalists or developers of applications. During my presentation, I would like to discuss every target audience, and I want to tell you what bank can do in this area. We divide our work in three main categories. Number one is diagnostics. Diagnostics is very important because very often the open data of governments of different countries publish data, but it doesn't always lead to the use of data. In some cases, because these data do not conform to the needs and demand of the population. The first thing we offer to do is the diagnostics and the feasibility analysis to publish the data in some levels and formats. Assessment of needs and competences. Number two is the increase of potential. When you are trying to understand, and this includes the development of skills and exchange of knowledge. And number three is the support of programs and partners, the development of platforms that can be tested in your regions. And the first thing, as we mentioned, was diagnostics, the assessment of needs and opportunities. In some countries, the use of mobile telephones is very popular. It's very important to understand it, because if it is the strength of your region and your oblast, it's important to use these technical opportunities. Much better, thank you. We are conducting the diagnostics in terms of how to use the technologies at this particular moment. It's very important to keep in mind that if you want to increase the demand of open data, you shouldn't invent some forms of using data that were not popular before. The important thing is to use the channels of information and communication with civil society that already exist. Of course, you have to fulfill them, but you always have to base your work on what people already know. We are conducting the diagnostics of the already existing mechanisms, and the international experts conducted the first experiment of this kind in Ulyanovsk. They study the international context, and now they propose the things that really worked on the global level to be adopted on the local level. Civil society is in some areas well developed, in some areas not so well developed. In some places journalists are very active, while in other places they are not so active. You have to analyze this information to develop your policy of open data to the best. After lunch today we'll have a report on how this diagnostics was conducted in Ulyanovsk. We propose to use different strategies to involve your target audiences. There are 5 main target audiences. Number 1 is the audience of developers. When you publish your data, the data will not be explicit by themselves to the civil society and masses of population. You need to have developers that will use the data and develop the applications. Andrew, Lucy and Katya were mentioning it, and they said that the main benefit of using open data is in applications that are very specific and they can be used for some needs of the population. How to develop these applications? In some situations you will have the stakeholders that will develop their applications, but this will not always happen immediately. You have to nurture and grow, develop this growth. You can conduct the competitions of developers. Lucy mentioned hackathons and other competitions. For example, you have a challenge, how to increase the accessibility at schools. You provide data from educational system of your region or your city to the developers. This is the data about for example, about the grades of the school children, and you give this data to the developers and they develop an application which can be used widely, for example, to compare the performance of this school and that school, the teachers and the students. You have to outline the problem you want to solve, and the developers help you to solve the problem. The important thing to keep in mind is you have to use these applications. There is a popular application on open data. It's about the infrastructure on the municipal level. Roads that need, for example, to be repaired, so on and so forth. One of the countries where the World Bank operates, a mayor of a city decided he is responsible to give the feedback to the population. So he was accountable for the ditches, holes on the roads, the pavement which needs to be repaired, so on and so forth. And the mayor of the city was responding these problems. These applications, similar applications, can be developed within the framework of competitions and you, being civil servants, can use this data in your daily work. It is also possible to organize the educational courses for the developers, to give them the necessary skills of using data and help them to manage the data before they develop the applications suitable for your goals. Code for America model, which is developed in different countries. It is popular in European cities as well. Code of America consists of the integration of the developers in the daily work of civil servants. The developers, for example, can develop an application which is useful for Amsterdam, and then it can later on be used for Berlin, for Moscow. And if you are implementing this model, for example, you can use the skills of your local developers, but also you can work with the developers from other countries. We mentioned the developers already, and the second thing to mention is the civil society. Civil society is very often the main users of open data and applications. It is important to assess the potential of the civil society. What are the opportunities and needs of the civil society, and what can you offer to them? Then you have to increase the awareness. Very often, you, being civil servants, invest a lot of resources and effort in publishing the data, but not everybody knows about it. Information campaigns and increasing the awareness is really important. Courses, educational courses and workshops are aiming to showing people that data is not something used by civil servants only. Supporting partnerships, something we identified in various countries where World Bank operates, is that one of the most efficient ways of using open data is the partnership between the NGOs and ministries. This is very contributive in the area of healthcare, education. In any area where you may have data, this kind of partnership can yield very good results. And you have to nurture it and invest your resources in these partnerships to happen. So what we can offer is the implementation of pilot projects. After having attracted civil society and the developers, involvement of civil servants. As a rule, the ministries, some ministries publish data while other ministries are not aware of this data being published. We propose open government workshops for the civil servants based on their own needs in their own ministry. For example, in the United States, the data shows that the most active users of open data are people working in the ministries. For example, the Ministry of Education publishes data, the Ministry of Healthcare is using the data for its own purpose. The support of this type of intergovernmental interagency collaboration is really important. Involvement of journalists. Both Lucy and Katya mentioned already how important can the journalists be in terms of using and disseminating the open data. We propose to conduct different courses on open data, workshops and master classes, tutorships, where the journalists can learn from the international experts how to use data, how to popularize the data, how can you combine two databases to identify various results. Involvement of universities. Universities are really valuable resources for the open data. The students can get the important knowledge for them, which they can use in their professional life. And they can also help civil servants and NGOs to collect data, to do the analysis and data monitoring. In many countries, the partnership between the state governmental agencies and universities brought to very good results. Whether these are the programs for educational programs for students or something else, if you are thinking of involving students in the civil, or if you are thinking of involving civil society in your project, students are the best people to take part in.
And very often, as a big problem, to develop the open data is how to involve the citizens into this process. Sometimes they don't have information and they don't have the opportunity, and what's important, what we can offer is to define target groups. We can use public libraries to show the citizens the applications they could use and to show to the parents how they choose between the schools and what kind of results we could see among different types of clinics and hospitals, and all this data which we could issue and popularize through the channels which are used by the citizens, and we can use these channels and to develop the input through which you could communicate with various people, very well informed, and with those layers of populations which do not use even the computer. I would like to finish off my presentation and to give you an example from Brasilia. And this project, the government asks. It was not directly related with the open data, but I wanted to invite many more citizens to discuss the citizens of Rio Grande do Sul. They don't use internet or information technologies during their daily routine. They just use various means like the bus. The activists, they visited different types of villages in this district and invited the people to come in and to use those applications which were offered, to share the problems with the governor of that area and to popularize these initiatives and to involve people who never knew that such opportunities exist. And more or less, that's also far about how to involve different groups of population. I would be happy to answer the question. And to summarize my presentation, the value of open data, there will be two levels. They could enhance the process of state governance and the services provided by the government, participation of the governments, of the state management, civil control, the selected choice, and the second part of our presentation, and how to use the target groups and how to use the different layers of the population so that they discuss that with the society, with the students, and with broad masses of population. Would be very happy to answer your questions now and after lunchtime. Thank you. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, we need to interrupt for lunch, and please, we can switch off the online translation a bit, and we'll continue after lunch at 2 p.m. Все, я просил бы сейчас навести камеру на этот логотип и отключить трансляцию.